What's something you learned embarrassingly late in life? Story 1. Not me, but my wife. She didn't know helium makes balloons float. We were getting ready for my daughter's first birthday and I had a helium tank. Since I'm usually very frugal, she couldn't believe that I wasted money on that. I asked her how else we were supposed to do it. Her answer was to just blow them up. I asked her how we were going to get them to float and her response was, buy the balloons that float. She had a college degree and works at an institution of higher learning. It was just a hole in her knowledge that took a very long time to get filled. I know some people might be wondering how she thinks balloons float. If I recall correctly, it's something like a special powder or something they put in there. I don't know, I never thought too much about it. This is the closest real life has ever gotten to that one Arthur scene. How do you get square balloons? Blow square breaths. All joking aside, I think it's nice that you call it what it is, a hole in her knowledge, instead of making fun of her while telling the story. Story 2. I live near the hospital for joint diseases. When I was a kid, I thought it was a special hospital for people who had two different diseases at the same time. I don't know why this reminds me, but when I was a kid, I watched the original Planet of the Apes movie. It really disturbed me. Then on the news, I heard about conflicts with gorillas. I watched soldiers running around, trading gunfire with shadowy figures in the trees. I listened as the newscaster talked about how the military had been driven back by heavily armed guerrilla forces. It blew my mind. It was all real. We were at war with the apes. For the next couple of weeks, I fully believed this. My parents were confused why I suddenly kept wanting to watch the news. I had nightmares about it. It wasn't until they interviewed the guerrilla leader that I was like, wait a minute. I can't even remember the conflict, but I still have flashbacks to my nightmares about the guerrilla wars. Honestly, I think every kid that heard about guerrilla warfare at a young age thought they were talking about gorillas. Story 3. When I was young, I thought you were awarded a Pulitzer Prize. I thought there was a popular spicy southern dish called filet mignon. I finally saw filet mignon written down and spoken aloud at the same time while watching a show with subtitles. Then I googled filet mignon and got nothing, and put two and two together. Broke my heart. Story 4. When I was a teenager, I posted a status online that said I was jacking off. I thought that meant that you were just bored and wasting time, until my older sister messaged me, horrified. Okay, this is the perfect segue into my favorite story. I used to work at a pizza place, and there was this one driver who was kind of dumb, really lazy, and always very rude. I forget his name, so I'll call him Steve. Steve was complaining because the manager wouldn't clock him out early. He's going around complaining to anyone who would listen, and I'm stuck at the cut table taking pizzas out of the oven. He's really talking at me, not to me, and he says, "This is total BS. I come in here, bust my nuts all over the place, and then they won't let me leave." There were like 4 of us who stopped what we were doing and looked at each other confused. He didn't know. I don't know how long he didn't know what that phrase meant, but I know he was like 4 years older than me. I kinda hope you didn't correct him. He sounds like he deserved to keep embarrassing himself. Story 5. Women's garments have different button arrangements than men's. I bought this wonderful coat on sale one year when I was working in Alaska over winter. I figured it was on sale because the buttons were opposite and there was just some manufacturing error. I'm an engineer, so it's just what I assumed. Nope, wore it home for Christmas and my mom instantly asked, "Why are you wearing a woman's coat?" It was a recurring joke the whole week that I was visiting family. Do I still wear that coat? Absolutely. I mean, when you look good, you look good. Can't let anybody stop you. Story 6. That a prostitute doesn't actually sell a piece of their body. For context, my mom and I were watching the scene from Titanic where Jack tells Rose that he painted a one-legged prostitute. I asked my mom what a prostitute was and she told me it's someone that sells their body for money. I could not fathom why someone would sell their leg for like $30. When I was little, my family was watching a movie and I walked in not long after a scene in which one of the characters comes inside out of the rain. I missed the part where it was raining, but I was watching when another character asked him what happened to him. He responded that his girlfriend dumped him. I assumed that meant she dumped a bucket of water all over him and that the situation happened so often that there was a term for it. This just has me realizing there are so many things I wouldn't know how to explain to children without making it confusing to them. Story 7. My sister was in her 50s when she found out what "you have an addictive personality" means. She thought after all these years of therapy that it meant people were addicted to her personality. We laugh hysterically when we talk about this, albeit in a sad way. Story 8. I'll never forget the first time I looked up into the night sky after I got glasses and realized you can, in fact, see the moon clearly. I assumed people who depicted it in art were taking creative licenses because they knew it should look like that for some reason, and that the human eye was incapable of seeing the moon without also seeing two other blurrier moons, sort of overlapping it. It blew my mind. My childhood friend is colorblind, usually confuses blues and purples, and he recently confided in us that he thought artists massively over-exaggerated rainbows in drawings and cartoons. When he looks at a real rainbow, the blue and purple end of the spectrum blends into the sky, so it essentially disappears, and the red-green end all merges into a color that he sees as yellow/brown. So to him, a real rainbow just looks like a yellowish line. Cartoon rainbows often have very bold and distinct colored lines, so he can interpret those more clearly, but he was shocked to hear that non-colorblind people can actually see every color in a real rainbow. Story 9. This happened when I was 22. Working at a restaurant, I was making a salad and I asked the chef for bumps, and he stared at me for like 60 solid seconds trying to figure out what I wanted. I explained to him I wanted bumps for my salad. I had all the rest of the toppings, but now I needed bumps. It turned out my family told me croutons were called bumps my entire life. I called my dad that night and confirmed that bumps are indeed actually called croutons. Why did my family call them bumps? Well, someone in my family had a speech impediment as a kid and couldn't say croutons, so they became bumps. We had other funny names for stuff, but I always knew what the real words were. I just never got around to learning croutons, I guess. I keep thinking about that line cook just staring at you for a full minute. He definitely thought you were asking him for a bump of something else. It really bothers me when adults keep using silly or mispronounced words instead of saying the actual word. I was in high school still saying boo-boo because my mom wouldn't call it anything else. I didn't know what they were supposed to be called and got made fun of for it. My brother still says paschetti instead of spaghetti and pancakes instead of pancakes because that's the only way my grandmother pronounced it. Story 10. The Cheesecake Factory is a restaurant and not an assembly line of workers making cheesecake. I always envisioned you would go in there and watch them, then eat a slice. I'd like to add that I've lived in close proximity to multiple locations my entire life, and my sister used to go all the time with her friends. I thought they all just really liked the cheesecake and the factory vibe of it all. It wasn't until my now fiance asked me to meet her and her friends there for drinks, and I figured it all out, when I was about 22 or 23. Story 11. This is just within my family, but I still think it's pretty funny. My mom's brother is gay, and I didn't realize it until I was 22. He has been with his husband for like 40 years now, a long time. I was never explicitly told about their life, so I never questioned it when I was a kid. It was just, "Hi, Uncle John. Hi, Uncle Dave." No big deal. I graduated college and was driving to a nice restaurant with my parents, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it clicked. They were howling with laughter all the way to the restaurant. They couldn't believe it took me this long to figure it out, and then my uncles joined in too. Everyone had a good laugh at my expense. They had a fun night joking about how I must have been a brilliant student indeed. My family was the same way. My dad's cousin always brought her close female friend to family holidays. I was 22 when they popped into my mind, and I was like, oh, wow, Cousin Christy is gay. I called my best friend to tell her about it. She got quiet and then asked me if her mom's sister who had lived with her friend for over 20 years now is gay too. Story 12. New England is a region, not a state. New Mexico is a state. New Jersey and New York are states. I knew that the Atlantic Northeast was all called New England, but I thought it was like how the Oregon Territory is the state of Oregon and its neighbors. Plus they have a football team, so come on. Story 13. When I was in college, I was getting ready to go out and it hit me like a lightning bolt. If you just thread the small end of the belt through your belt loops all the way around, literally any belt can fit your pants. Because up until then, I thought sometimes I just had belt loops that were too small for certain belt buckles. I ran out to my friends and was like, "Guys, check this out!" as I proceeded to demonstrate for them what I had just learned. I genuinely thought they'd be excited for me. It was then that I learned everyone else on Earth knew the right way to wear a belt except for me. Unbelievable how many times up until then I spent trying to jam the buckle side in first and coming to the conclusion that I just needed bigger belt loops. Unfortunately, this is a true story and I have no good excuse for why this dumb thing took me so long to figure out, except maybe it's that I'm a woman and I guess I didn't wear pants with belts that often. Believe it or not, I ended up graduating from college. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 14. How to start and use a lawnmower. My first husband used to be somewhat traditional about certain chores. I didn't care since I didn't want to mow or shovel anyway. And I was 20. Fast forward 17 years and he died very suddenly. I didn't know how to do basic things. I remember asking my coworkers if you could pull a self-propelled lawnmower backwards without breaking it. I cried many times while shoveling that first winter. Every scoop was a reminder of my loss and subsequently finding out he'd been cheating. I've spent the last 10 plus years learning all the things I was embarrassed I didn't know back then. Now I'm a farmer, a carpenter, and I own a sweet plow, mower, and tractor, and I know each piece of equipment inside and out. If you want more context, he died in a car accident. I found out the week after he died that he had been cheating on me with a coworker. He had to have an autopsy to determine the cause of the crash. So during the waiting period, his family laid it all on the table, what they'd known about for 6 months before he died. He'd been cheating and planning to divorce me. The best part? His parents, who never actually liked me, insisted his mistress have her own receiving line at the funeral, and then they tried to sue me for the life insurance benefit I received. Total and complete chaos in my heart, mind, and body. I was at war with myself because I couldn't take it out on him. You calling him your first husband implies that you went on to get remarried, and I hope to God you did, and that your life is very happy now. I find it insane how disgusting his parents acted about his mistress, funeral, and insurance. Literally all of it. I can't even fathom that people like that exist. Story 15. I thought that horses had toes until I was 22. I thought the hoof was a horseshoe and the toes were tucked inside. How did I learn how wrong I was, you ask? I was walking past a cavalry museum and saw a horse statue and loudly remarked, "It must hurt so bad when they fold a horse's toes to put them inside the shoe." Dozens of horse enthusiasts turned and looked at me with bewilderment in their eyes. Yeah, it's true, horses do not have fingers. Actually, if you kinda look at it, their whole leg is like one long finger, and the horse shoe is their fingernail. Story 16. When I was really young, my sister told me she threw her guts up, so I was really afraid of vomiting my entire insides up for years. When I was 5, my older cousin told me that it was bad to eat the bubble solution kids play with. He did this by drawing a finger over his throat in the universal signal of death. Except it wasn't very universal to a 5-year-old me, and I thought he meant my throat would literally be cut, because of course, this was after I accidentally ingested some bubble solution. When I was pretty young, my parents took us to see Dr. Zhivago at a drive-in. At one point late in the movie, a guy stumbles off a stretcher, spits on the ground, and dies of a heart attack. For years afterwards, I thought in a heart attack you spit your heart out of your mouth and that's what kills you. Story 17. This isn't really on par with the other stories, it's just incredibly stupid. When I was in high school, my mom got a hysterectomy. At the same time, there was a fridge in her room that she and my stepdad used for snacks to hide them. She would never tell us what was in it and said we were never allowed to open it. So logically, I just assumed she kept her uterus or ovaries in the fridge because for some reason I thought that's what people do is keep removed organs. Till I was 15 I thought this. I have no idea why. For spares? Posterity maybe? My mother still laughs to this day because it was just their snacks that they didn't want eaten, and I took it in a direction that I'm sure made her question why she had children. To be fair, my sister thought a hysterectomy was getting your bladder removed, so that's what she thought was in the fridge. She was much younger than me, however. I love that it was obviously you that told your sister there were organs in the fridge and she just accepted it. It's even funnier that you were 15 and said it to your own younger sister with full confidence. Reminds me of when I was 12. In 1967, my mother had an operation to have her gallbladder removed. This was a major surgery in those days before modern techniques were used, and she was in the hospital recovering for several days. One evening after we visited her, I finally mustered up the courage to ask my father how she was going to go to the bathroom now that her bladder had been removed. Story 18. I learned that I needed glasses at the age of 26. Things aren't supposed to get blurry at 15 to 20 feet away. You're supposed to be able to see individual leaves on trees. Someone posted a photo of what it looks like at night when you have astigmatism. Then I read all the comments and realized I have astigmatism and that lights don't look like that to everyone. Story 19. My favorite Reddit response to this question was like 5 to 10 years ago, but this girl had a hilarious realization when she was about 20. When she was like 7 years old, she asked her dad what the numbers on the gas pump were, the octane levels that said 87, 89, and 93. Her dad said that's what year they made the gas. Newer is more expensive. It was a simple answer that she accepted quickly. A 7-year-old would buy that. Well, 13 years later, she pulled into a gas station with her boyfriend, offered to pump, and asked, "What year gas do you want?" He didn't understand what she was asking. She asked like 2 more times before explaining, do you want 1987 gas or 1993 gas? The new stuff is more expensive. He questioned her and she explained that her dad told her that years ago, and he burst into tears laughing. Right on the spot, she called her dad slightly upset as her boyfriend couldn't breathe because he was laughing so hard. When I was really little, I was watching one of the old Japanese Godzilla movies with my dad. It was dubbed into English, so I asked him why their mouths weren't matching the words, and he said, "That's just how Asian people talk. Their mouths work differently than ours do." For a very long time, that's just what I believed. There weren't any Asian people in the area that I lived in. Then, when I was in 6th grade, we got a new kid from Korea. When they were in front of the class introducing themselves, the teacher asked if we had any questions. I raised my hand and said, "Yeah, why don't you talk funny?" My teacher just stared at me, so I dug my hole even deeper and said, "My dad says that when Asian people talk, their mouths don't match their words, but yours do. Are you sure you're Asian?" My mom was called in for a talk, and I had to explain that I said that because that's what my dad said when we watched Godzilla. Neither of them had any clue what I was talking about, so my mom confronted my dad when he got home, and he literally fell to his knees from laughing so hard. He looked at me and said, "I forgot I ever said that to you. I can't believe you believed me, let alone for this long. What an idiot." Needless to say, my mom was not amused. Story 20. This is something my little sister did throughout school. We were about 8 years apart, so we never overlapped in school. She's always been a straight-A student, and I found out that she worked extra hard because she wanted to catch up to me in school, so that we could be in school at the same time. I almost cried. And for those of you who want to know, yes, my sister not only caught up, but surpassed me. She is a beautiful young woman who graduated with high honors in psychology and is going on to complete a master's degree. My little brother had a meltdown at the age of 4 when I informed him that he would never be older than me. Story 21. A few months ago, 2 of my colleagues both handed in their notice at around the same time. I kept hearing the phrase "they're both moving on to pastures new" being thrown around the office in the weeks leading up to them leaving. I hadn't heard this phrase before and thought it was the name of the rival company that they were going to. I thought it was weird that nobody was talking about how they were both leaving for the same company. I was in the car with one of them who was leaving and I said, "So where are you guys going to be working?" And just before I could embarrass myself and say "pastures new," they interrupted me and said that they're not going to the same place and asked me where I had heard that. I think at the moment I realized I was stupid and didn't mention it again. Story 22. I actually missed my first period. My mom was washing my underwear that I hastily tried to rinse in the washroom sink before tossing in the hamper. She asked if I got it and I said no. I was embarrassed because I thought I was pooping myself in my sleep. I didn't know blood turns brown when it oxidizes. Though not chicken-sized in my mind, I did expect to see an egg, despite my mom and teachers giving me good education on this topic. The next week, she showed me a video of how they do in vitro fertilization, and I finally understood that mammals' eggs are really, really tiny. Keeping that in the back of my mind to explain to any future kids I have. Looking back on it, I'm not exactly sure how big I thought the ovum was going to be, considering I was told we have thousands of eggs. This is a little graphic, but I didn't have good sex ed, and my family took me to the gynecologist after I pleaded with them for months about extreme pain while trying to use tampons. Turns out, you're supposed to discard the plastic part so it doesn't pinch and leave tiny lacerations all over your nether regions. I have nothing to say about that last one. I think I just need to lie down. Story 23. I didn't know tortilla chips were made out of tortillas until I was 20 years old and saw the line cook at my job cut up a tortilla and throw it in the deep fryer. See, I knew this, but I tend to speak before I think. I was at lunch with a friend in high school and we were having fresh tortillas and dipping them in queso. I said to her, "They should make chips out of these." And she looked at me for a second and said, "You mean like tortilla chips?" I was so upset with myself. Story 24. I thought ponies were just baby horses until I was 23. I've always thought ponies were just young horses. Then I was at work one day and a girl was saying how she wanted a pony because she didn't think she could handle taking care of a full-sized horse, and I told her that I thought she was a little naive since it would eventually become a full-sized horse. She looked at me like I was an idiot, which I am, and asked, "Hold on, do you think ponies are just baby horses?" To which I replied, "Are they not?" So yeah, turns out I'm a dummy. I never really had any experience with horses. I just knew that ponies were small horses, so I assumed that it was like how puppies are just baby dogs. Ponies were therefore baby horses. Story 25. I learned that pork and beans are not called cowboy beans. I was 18 and asked a grocery store clerk to help me find the cowboy beans. We were looking everywhere and I was getting frustrated because I know that every store carries these beans. After a while, I pick up a pork and beans can with a picture and say, "See, it looks just like this." He says, "You mean pork and beans?" Then I realized that my mom just called them that so that I would eat them. The look of disappointment from that grocery store clerk haunts me to this day. Cowboy beans are a real thing and there's different ways to make it, but it's generally baked beans with added meat, usually hamburger. So pork and beans isn't really cowboy beans. Maybe your mom just wanted you to feel cool so you'd eat your supper. Story 26. When I was younger, I heard the term oral contraceptive and I took it to mean that you could get pregnant from mouth stuff. Thanks for watching until the end. Please leave your story in the comments. I would also love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again and see you next time.